Hi everyone, and welcome to the next series for the inspir'em webinars. I'm Emma Maslen, I'm the CEO of inspir'em. Today we're going to be kicking off a new series talking about decision process, which is very much the end of the sales cycle, but also how your customers are making decisions in the middle of the sales cycle to be able to move forward to the end. We will be talking about paper process naturally as part of this decision process webinar and the series that we'll be doing. So we'll be picking up a couple of other letters along the way. So today I'm joined by James Lavers, who is from Clarify B2B, one of our partners, and we're going to be talking about real life decision process because James is a closer. So welcome, James. Thanks very much for joining us on the webinar today.
Thank you for having me.
Pleasure. Be great just to kick off. Just tell us, just give us a short introduction to yourself. How long have you been selling and what sorts of clients are you selling to?
Yeah, no, of course. I started my career in sales actually selling boxes of HelloFresh door to door in Sydney. I had a short stint in recruitment when I came back to the UK, which wasn't really for me, and then joined Clarify as an SDR probably back in 2019. Initially helping one of our digital engineering clients to build a pipeline in the UK public sector. A little bit about Clarify, I suppose. I've been here 7 years now, and I'm now a senior AE. We're a growth partner to B2B tech organisations, so the types of organisations we work with, everything from high growth scale ups all the way through to big enterprise tech orgs. Whether it's SaaS platform services, our clients' common challenges all center around having a very high value proposition that they're looking to sell into the enterprise space. So that comes with it multiple decision makers, lengthy buying cycles, convoluted buying processes, and we help our customers navigate that. Whether that be transforming their own teams to help them to do that better themselves, or acting as an extension of their team, executing upon strategic account-based campaigns to drive pipeline and revenue. And obviously, my job is to design and sell programs of work to these, whether it be high growth scale ups or enterprise tech organizations. So given our background and we like to try and model best practice into our own sales process, hopefully I'm well positioned to talk about all things decision process and close plan today.
Great. So what I love about having James on here, everybody, so certainly feel free to put some questions into the chat, is James is closing your bosses. That's what he's doing. There's definitely going to be some tips and tricks on how to close the bosses today for sure. But complex enterprise sales, because like you say, you're dealing with some of those really big tech or B2B businesses for sure. So okay, so let's talk a little bit about decision process and specifically, there's lots going on in decision process, and one of the reasons why you were sort of volunteered or nominated to join us today was for your use of close plans. So, how does a close plan help you with navigating that decision process in an organization?
Yeah, so I think I find it really helpful in a couple of ways in particular. So one is if you're really good and stringent at using close plans, it really helps you to identify early on and then throughout the process, like where your gaps are. And then it makes it really easy to prep for the next steps and the next calls because you know what questions you need to ask. And it's a really good way of like keeping momentum going. So I suppose that's the always on part. And then once you've built enough value and built enough trust, it's just I find it so useful as a way to like share back with the prospect. And we can talk about like how we do that a little bit more, I suppose. But it's a great way to continue to build that trust and help to share with them what your concerns are, what you think needs to happen in order for the challenge that you've established or the goal that you're trying to work together towards, like what needs to happen in order for that to actually happen and become true.
Yeah. And just on that then, so is there a point at which we often get the question about close plans about is there a particular point in the sales cycle where you're thinking about a close plan, you're thinking about putting one together? How do you approach that? When is too soon, perhaps?
I think a little part of it is a bit of seller's intuition. But generally, I do look to be doing it after first, second meetings when you feel like you've established a problem, a need, you've started to scope out a bit like what the answer could look like, and then it's once you've got those mapped out and you feel like there's some good interest and intent from the buyer, that's when I think it's really important that you've started to have a closed plan starting to put together
Mm.
because it helps to further qualify. It helps to help me understand where the gaps are, and it helps to know where else am I going to need to take this problem to be solved.
Yeah, and it's probably worth just explaining for those of you who aren't familiar with Clarify, like any great enterprise solution, there is a little bit of lag between when you contract somebody and actually when they see the benefit. Because if you imagine that you're doing lead generation for complex sales, if the challenge is high quality leads or revenue, you've got to onboard, you've got to get up and running, you've got to develop those opportunities, and you've got to get that going. How do you connect the close plan to what the outcome is for the customer? Are you explicitly putting that on the close plan and saying to them, well, look, if you're looking for this outcome, we've got to reverse engineer this timeline here?
Big time. And I think that's really key to our like full proposal process as well, because quite often we're linking revenue and pipeline outcomes to a timeline that's linked to them. So it's quite often a case of playing back, well, if you need to have achieved this much revenue or this much pipeline or this much growth, depending on what the objective is by X date, then we need to work backwards in order for us to ramp efficiently to hit that, then all of these things need to be true, and here are the deadlines and milestones that we need to hit in order to do that. And playing that back, not only does it help them to get on, but it just makes it feel quite real for them, I think, as well. Like it might feel like something that's 6, 9 months down the line, but actually if you don't take action right now, like there's a real danger that we're not going to be able to hit those targets or fill that gap that we're talking about here. And so yeah, it actually really helps that there's often that compelling event sometime in the distance to help build the timeline of dates in a close plan.
Yeah, absolutely. It helps build the urgency for sure. And it's
100%.
about the mutual benefit. Whilst we're talking about close plans, because we're going to talk about close plan, the tool, as well, we
Mm.
are talking about sort of mutual success. So you talked about some of the steps that you would have sort of in that process. Quite often we see that people feel a bit overwhelmed by a close plan, and also done in the wrong way as well, you can overwhelm the client as well. How do you avoid that? How do you make sure that the close plan is something that you can work with and systematically work through in your meetings without customer feeling like, oh, Jesus, it's a lot we got to get done.
Yeah. No, I think that playing it back to them, so I mean, if I look at my process, I've got a closed plan which has got a million to-dos on and things that help me to tick off and see how qualified an opportunity is and how far along in the process I am and what my gaps are. A ton of that shouldn't necessarily be relevant to them or their concerns. It's also aligning internal stuff, clarify end. So I think a big part of it is only exposing them to the things that a professional buyer needs to know, like make myself easy to buy from. So by doing things like cutting out anything that's only going to confuse them or isn't relevant to them, making sure that I'm putting things that are a real priority in front of them, using their language, keeping it really simple and keeping it time bound as well. I think, which it can be a bit of a, uh, I don't want to use the term arduous, but like it can be quite a manual process, like cutting out all the things that aren't relevant to them. But I think it's a really key one because it keeps them engaged, and you can quite quickly see how helpful the prospect's going to be when you put these things in front of them.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I love the fact that you talked there about them being professional buyers. Often we forget that. We think that I mean, you're in the sales world and you're selling to sales, so maybe you don't forget that they're professional buyers. But quite often as salespeople, we feel like we're pushing on something that is a mystery to the customer, but we have to remember that they are buying stuff every day. They're buying enterprise licenses, enterprise solutions all the time. So it sounds like that's a narrative that you've used quite often.
Yeah, I'd say so. Like I do in my world, I do come across people who've never bought something like Clarify before. I do think we're quite unique in that regard. But then by knowing how so many other organizations generally do buy, um, almost coaching them through it and using the closed plan as a way to coach them through. Generally, at this point, we would anticipate speaking to X or Y, or maybe the budget might come from over here if they're not the ones funding it themselves. And even if I'm not always right in suggesting those things, it's generally a good way to get them thinking in the right way of things they might need to do or people they need to go and ask, whether it's for permission, whether it's for budget, whether it's for things like contracting. So that's for the people that haven't bought loads before, but equally knowing all those things makes it a hell of a lot simpler when chatting to people that do buy more frequently.
Yeah. And you know as well what will make that project a success because you'll know all of the personas, which are the people who have to get involved, those sorts of things. It may be that you're sort of looping those people in, getting those
Mhm.
people involved as well. Okay. If anybody's got a question today for James or myself, then please feel free to pop that into the chat. Um, I did want to ask a question about reaction to closed plans as well, because sometimes people feel like when you whip out this very well prepared spreadsheet, or you've exported it from a tool like ClosePlan, sometimes customers can have a reaction to that. Have you got any thoughts on that? Have you got any thoughts on, you've had a customer that's had a reaction which is, whoa, hang on a minute, let's just back up here, or just generally are people okay with it?
I have to say that I can't think of a time when I've pulled up a closed plan and someone's been like, "Whoa, what are you doing?" But generally, I'd sort of bucket it into maybe two different camps. You've got one camp where they ask loads of questions about the closed plan, which I often quite like because it means that they're really engaged and they want to
Yeah.
understand what they need to do, which is great. Or they just sort of like gloss over it and say like, "Yeah, that's fine," and they're the tricky ones, because because you know that you're really going to need to keep coming back to this closed plan and bring them through the process, and that's fine, right? You're never going to get everyone just doing exactly what you need by exactly what time, but just having that as a point of reference and being able to hold yourself and them to account by saying, look, we were working towards these dates. We don't want to shift these timelines back even more. It's really great for that.
Yeah. So I've got a story actually from my when I was a sales leader and I was in a meeting looking at a close plan with one of my reps and the champion at the time. We'll put the champion in quotes
Inverted
for a
commas.
second. Yeah, because we got the close plan out and they did exactly that. They just glossed over the whole thing and they were like, yeah, it's all good, it's all good, it's all good. They had absolutely zero idea how to actually get anything done in the organization and actually turned out to be completely the wrong person. So, like you say, it's a great way to qualify. How do you deal with that? How do you deal with if they are a little bit aloof with the details? What do you start thinking about?
I think it's something that I've got better at over time because I think when you're still relatively like new into sales, you do just assume that they know what you're talking about. And even if you've gone to the effort of putting it in their language and making it simple, which again is something I think I've got better at is making it simpler and simpler. Um, I just, I feel like if I've done a really good enough job of like all the upfront qualification and scoping of the work, and they're really bought into what you want to do, and you know that they're bought into it. It's asking them like tough questions, and once you've built enough trust, it is okay to do that, even though it might feel uh, big or scary or foreign. Like just say to them like in black and white. So we've got this question, and maybe it's something to do with the contract. Do you know who the signatory is going to be? Or I'm not sure. Okay, how do we find out who that person is? Who
Yeah.
are you going to take this contract to? Like, even though it might feel a bit like pulling teeth, it feels quite uncomfortable. Like, you need to bring it back to the fact that if we want to get this done, these things are going to need to be true. So be brave and just ask those questions, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's one of the things that we try and encourage around sort of deal reviews and when you're doing these types of closed plan reviews as well. The goal isn't to have all the answers. The goal is to work out where you've got the holes and take an action to go and address those holes, whether it's you were taking the action with the champion, or the champions taking the action and getting that deal over the line. Okay.
Mhm.
Um, so you talked about relevance as well. So you talked about making the close plan in the customer's terminology as well, like as much as we can. We'll have our own names for things, but we definitely want to use the customer's terminology. What other tips would you have around close plans as well when you're sort of using them and presenting them back to the customers? Any thoughts that you would have there?
I think a bit, and I've already sort of alluded to this, is being quite explicit on dates. So as well as simplifying, putting it in their language, and making sure what you're putting in front of them is a genuine priority that needs to get done. So not just like little like to-dos, like make it really key actionable things for them. And then having dates, it then makes it really easy, like to map when things are going to close. We spoke about forecasting earlier, so it's useful for me, but it's also useful for them to forecast like when things need to get done. And if things aren't getting done, then you've got something really simple to come back to and say, like, if we're behind on this, if we want to hit these pipeline targets, these opportunity targets, these revenue targets, that this is obviously in my world, then keep coming back to it. Just have it really clear, make it really clear like what the action is. Yeah, simplicity and language and dates, I think are probably what I'm always doing.
Yeah, absolutely. And so there's lots of different ways that you can think about a closed plan. You can either start from a view of here's all the typical things that you would get done, or the other really simple way that you can have a look at this is if you could just have a whiteboard with the customer and put the dates on by which they've got to achieve the
Yeah.
thing that they've got to achieve, and just work that back on a whiteboard. And then you can very quickly say, well, if you're going to go live here and get some outcome here, we've got to work that back, implementation, design, whatever the process is to get it done, contract, and then working it back from there. So it can be a very simple reverse timeline in the beginning, and then you can add your actions sort of as you go along.
Mm,
We always do a little bit of prep for these things, and one of the points that you mentioned in the prep was about it being about habit, and
yeah.
it's very much become a habit for you. I don't know if you wanted to say a few words about, how habitual you've got with close plans.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if I'm like a rare salesperson, or maybe I'm a bit mathsy in my background, and part of me like likes the process a little bit, I suppose. But equally, like I do this when you've got that seller's intuition that this deal, this opportunity has got legs. I'm starting to build a close plan. I think when I first came into the AE role, it's obviously something you're like told you do this. And it's a great tool to start to learn typically the things that come up, typically the types of questions that you need to ask, and then you start to see consistent gaps in your deals. And then that means that you, out of habit, then start to already fill those gaps before you ask the questions. Even now, as sort of long in the tooth as I feel I am, it's
You're
never.
not, James. You're not long in the tooth. I can tell you now. But anyway, I know you
Oh,
feel like you've been around forever. But anyway, long in the
no, I
tooth.
know, I know. Uh,
God,
yeah.
I've trained you now, haven't I? Go on.
You have, yeah. Uh, there's still always like gaps to fill. Like there's still always I do it every time, come after every call once I'm in a sales process, I'm looking at what can I now fit, what's now done, what do I now still need to know, and then it's helping me prep for the next call. So just make it a habit. I don't see you're only shooting yourself in the foot and ruining the likelihood of your opportunity and its probability by not doing a closed plan. And I fundamentally believe that. Part of me likes process a bit, but equally, all of my deals, I'm doing it quite religiously from quite early on.
Yeah, and I think as well, it's a really key point that you mentioned there as well. We often talk about meeting prep, and it's very easy to go from meeting to meeting to meeting and let the customer lead you down the road. But, a complete sort of collaborating with the customer, putting together a closed plan, reviewing that afterwards, and reviewing it objectively, which is, yeah, they've said we have to do this, 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 and this. Get another set of eyes on it and just make sure that nothing's been missed because quite often when we're being sort of swept along by the customer, there are key things that we end up missing. So definitely worth a review there as well. Let's just spend a couple of minutes. Again, if anybody's got any questions, feel free to pop them into the chat and we'll take some questions. Um, let's just talk about the tool for a second because you use the tool ClosePlan for
Mhm.
this as well. So that's something that Clarify use internally. So maybe it'd just be good to understand a little bit about so what's in the tool and how do you then get it out and give it to the customer? So how do you make that customer ready?
Yeah, so I think that so it's a set so it appears as a plugin in Salesforce. So on my opportunities, I pull up an opportunity, and we've got a few tabs of it. So the first feels very much like a Clarify salesperson qualification tool. So helps me to look at helps me to qualify what the problem is, the pain is, understand like where the budgets are. So everything that would fall under Medic, we have our own methodology that we call Clarify. That's pretty similar to Medic, but bit of a clarifiism there, and that's super useful for me, particularly in the early stages. And then once you start to see the gaps in that, we've then got a sort of scorecard Gantt view of all the things that need to be true our end and customer side in order for this to be a signed customer for us to get it over the line. So that appears to us as a Gantt with timelines, and generally what works really well is I will export that, simplify all the dates, cut out everything that's not client specific. So all the stuff
Yep.
that's clarify, I take out and then put it in their language. So I might be left with like 10, 15 things that need to be true. I then prioritize, keep it as simple as possible for the client, and then work with them on a collaborative document of it that as simple as possible. ClosePlan also enables us to have an org chart to help map out all of our people, our influencers, who we've got a positive relationship with, who we need to get to, that sort of thing. And that can also be quite useful in the right circumstance to share back with the prospect as well to help map who else do we need to be on board with this if we want to get this over the line. Do we perceive anyone to be a blocker? That sort of thing.
Yep. Yeah, that's great. And very much, we talk about a lot, getting together all charts. Again, it's because we want to identify risk within that. It's not so that you can present back and seem to know more about your customer than they know. It's about you trying to work out, well, actually, who else do you need to go and talk to? So, very important to be able to do that. It's interesting that you talked about sort of the clarify sort of criteria as well. More and more people with AI are going down the scorecard road. Um, it's worth just saying that just for people that are looking at scorecards, with scorecards, it's not about getting 100% on the scorecard. It's about looking at engagement. And there's some really interesting data that's come out this week, actually, from Ebster in the reports that they pull out around qualification. And what scorecards actually pull out is where you are with relationships. So, therefore, how more likely are you to actually close an opportunity with some level of control? So really interesting that you've got that, and there's lots of scorecards that are available out there as well. Okay, great. Well, unfortunately, that's all we've got time for today. 25 minutes absolutely flies through. So thanks so much, James, for joining us today. Some really interesting insights.
No, I've really, really enjoyed it. Thanks for having me.